Well, they might have. Think of the dynamics of what's going on here, though. First of all your pastors are corrupt to the point beyond corruption. They're all in it for the money. They're all in it for the bucks. They're all in it for what is good for them, not necessarily good for you guys.
These are Jews, right?
Yeah, Jews. Well, I'm using the word pastor, but no, they were all priests. A Sadducee was a priest, and a Pharisee was a priest, just they had different. And there was a third group called the Essenes. The Essenes were a very small group, and they didn't have any political connections whatsoever. So they, unlike the other ones, were really not visible ever. And if I doubt very few of them even went to the big councils and that stuff. They went to the temple, of course, on high and holy days. But as for all the political nonsense, they weren't involved in it. The Essenes were the ones who were feared by the Jews. They were afraid that the Jews were going to screw up and Rome was going to clobber them all and destroy everything. So it was the Essenes who went out to a desolate place by the Dead Sea and copied all the scrolls, copied all the Bibles and that stuff, the Old Testament.
Live out there?
Yeah. They lived out there very, very, nothing life. And but they knew all the caves out there and that kind of stuff. So after they copied these things, they put them in pots, of course, and they hid them in these caves for fear that Rome would get so frustrated with the Jews, they'd just wipe everything out and destroy the entirety of their tradition, of their God of 2,300 years. So that's why they did it. And of course, it blessed us to this day when we found those. And they were earliest copies of the scripture we got, and you can see them if you want to go to Jerusalem. They have a museum there, and it's a big black stone and a big white stone, and I forget what they call a museum of somebody. Anyway, it determines the black and white, like John was saying and all that, the good and evil and the whole 9 yards. And the whole museum is actually underground. You go in and go down, 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 down. And that's because of rockets and bombs and tanks, all that stuff. But if you get down there, you'll go into a room, and the room itself is shaped like one of the giant old scroll things. We would call it a rolling pin. But see, they used to use it, and they'd wrap those scrolls around these rolling pins. And they could roll it out to chapter whatever, and then, roll this one in, and roll this one out. And that's what the Torah and all the scriptures were kept in, those things. Well, they've made a room, the whole, just like it, like the scrolls. And then in the middle of the room is the rolling pin, and around the rolling pin, which is huge, it's probably as big as this room, around is the ancient Dead Sea Scrolls that they found. They're all presented. Of course, they're in glass and bulletproof, everything. But you can sit there and see these scrolls that the Essenes wrote thousands of years ago, millenniums ago, by hand out at the Dead Sea, then hid them in a pot. So that we have those today, and those confirm most of a lot of the Old Testament. So you've got to remember, the New Testament isn't written yet. Paul is working on it. So, all right, that doesn't have anything to do with this chapter. I'm just saying that as far as the Essenes are concerned, and I would think the rest of the world, that was time well spent for them to sit out there and copy those things just in case the Romans destroyed everything, which they did. It wouldn't be for a few more years, about 55 AD or maybe 57, somewhere in there. Rome had enough, and they destroyed everything. The temple came down, everything came down. The people escaped to Masada, and then took them 3 more years, but they destroyed that too. And all the people killed themselves, if you remember, up on top of Masada, 137 of them or whatever. They killed themselves so that Rome would have no victory. So, that's a whole nother ballgame. All right? So here you have a bunch of priests that are as corrupt can be. and yet still honored by most of the people. Because, who's going to make fun of God's anointed? It even says that in the law. And Paul quotes it to him. It says, Lord, help anybody who makes fun of the Lord's anointed. Did you see that verse in there when he said that? Verse 5. But the bystanders, Ananias told his bystander boys right there, he goes, punch him in the mouth. So bam, they whack him. And Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. And do you sit and try me according to the law, and in violation of that same law order me to be struck? That doesn't make sense. In the Word it says you're not to strike one another who are brothers in the Lord. And I am a brother in the Lord. Remember, Paul used to be a Pharisee. In fact, he was the Pharisees' Pharisee, the best of the best. That's what he's trying to tell them. I came from the Pharisaical circle. My father was a Pharisee. I'm a Pharisee. And yet you order me struck? And then he reminds them of the law, that in violation of the law, that you're not allowed to strike your brother, nor shall you speak evil of a ruler of your people. Paul was a ruler of the people. So if you speak violent of me, and if you extend violence to me, what is Paul literally doing there? He's showing by their hands, by their actions, how corrupt they truly are. You see what I'm saying? They're putting him on trial for being disgraceful to the law, and yet right there in the course of the trial in front of everybody, they order him to be struck, first of all, which is not allowed, and second of all, they're speaking evil of a priest himself that was, at least before, was a great priest of the Pharisees. In fact, he was considered one of the best of the Pharisees ever had. And now they're speaking evil of him. Well, what does that tell you about what's going on in that church there?
Corrupt leadership.
Okay, corrupt leadership, but what is the implication of corrupt leadership? If the leaders are evil, how much better are the people going to be? Now let's go back a little bit and wonder why it was so many people followed Jesus. Because they knew they weren't going to get anything out of the priests. And here's a man offering the kingdom of God and, passing out Subway sandwiches at the same time. So he's feeding us, he's comforting us, he's giving us a promise of God in heaven and all that good stuff we love to hear. And these guys are just crooks, taking us for every dime we have, every time there's a sacrifice that's due. So which one are you going to lead to? Well, half of the people, at least the good people, are going to lead towards Christ, right? But Tom, how can you say that when they're cheering him one minute and crucifying him the next? Think about it for a minute. What did the priests teach these people?
What's good for me?
Well, what's good for me is good for the world. That's true. But also that, you can almost get away with anything, can't you? The priests have for years, and they've gotten rich off it. You ever wonder how people go, and it's an amazing thing, it happens in America, I don't know if it happens anywhere else, it may, but how you can be broke and go to Congress and in 3 or 4 years have $113 million? How's that possible? When your salary is only $100,000, we'll round it off, it's about $120 to start, but your salary is only $100,000 a year, and yet in 3 years you're up to $17 million in your bank, and you only had $67 when you went into Congress. Tell me how that's possible in an honest way. I was talking to Carol last night. I said, you and I both have doctorate degrees. We've both had pretty good careers. I make a fine salary at the church. You made an incredible salary with Scholastic. And yet, Where's our $17 million? We don't have $17 million in the bank. Oh, we got a 20, 30,000, in savings, but where's our 17 million?
We're all business.
But we were professional. We got the degrees. We didn't get an honorary anything. It was their real degrees. We're good people. We did everything right. We did everything honest.
There's the word.
So the people did learn something from the Pharisees. What did they learn? Well, if you're on the right team, you get rich. It might not be moral, it might not even be ethical, and it might not be, but who's going to judge you? Even Jesus said, you know where there's great honor? Amongst thieves. Ever wonder why that's in our gospel? If you do good only to the people that you hang with, and you two are both crooks, Jesus said, well, where's the honor to God there? The honor is great amongst thieves. No thief is going to rat out another thief. You see, they're all in it together. So, what's the option? Well, if you don't join the thieves, then you're going to work your whole life, hopefully, in a nice job and a good profession and do everything right, and you're going to end up with not $17 million. I'm talking about a specific congressperson who it was made known. After 3 years, they went in, and they know for a fact $67 in their bank account, and now 17 million. I don't even know how much 17 million is, because it's more than I have.
Or will ever have.
And see, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You look at these other people with 280 million, 790 million, some even into the billions. Wow. What's going on there?
That's terrible. Yeah.
Well, they're spending your money and even your money. As you're a young man, you got a whole lot of life in front of you, but you've been working, right? And you've been paying taxes, right? Somebody's taking your taxes, and they got 17 million. What do you got in the bank? You got 67 bucks, don't you? That's the deal. So Jesus says, oh, there's great honor amongst thieves. You're not going to call them out on that, because they'll all stick together. And yet here's Paul. He gets into this crowd of thieves, of which you got to remember, he used to be one, until God knocked him off his horse and said, there is a God, I'm him, and you're aggravating me. So Paul turned his life around, started working for the Lord, and now he walks into this council. He has become a man of righteousness, of holiness, trying to live to Jesus Christ, whose demands are forever. And he walks into all these treasured and proud, perfect, holy people. And he says, I don't have to tell you of your own corruption. You know it. He didn't say that. But he says, I used to be one of you guys, and I am aware of everything that's going on here. And it is a far, far, far cry from that of which Jesus would recommend. He called him a whitewashed wall, kind of like a whitewashed tomb, but Christ already said that, so he can't use that again. So he said, you're like a whitewashed wall, shining, standing strong and pretty, when all inside there's nothing. And of course they order him struck, which was them saying, this is how corrupt we are. Pow! And then he says, how is it you can strike me knowing that your law says you cannot? Your law says that. How is it you can speak ill of me knowing that your own law says you're not allowed to speak ill of anybody? That's in our law too, by the way. You can't, even if Chanter's an idiot, you can't say that. Of course you don't need to. Everybody knows Chanter's an idiot. But you see what I'm saying? Their own corruption was put on display. It's funny how John, in accordance with Jesus, said, what we don't see now, what's done in the dark now, will be exposed in the light completely. Or when God says, when we stand, it's given to man to die but once, after which you have an appointment which you will keep. This is Hebrews. You will keep that appointment, whereby you will stand before God naked, fully exposed. Everything. And he's not talking about clothes. You will stand before God fully exposed, where then by a decision shall be rendered. And you know what? Judgment won't need to be rendered because you will have already judged yourselves. Ever wonder why Jesus said that in the great Beatitudes and all that whole Sermon on the Mount thing? Judge not, because by it you will be judged yourself. You ever think about that? Paul's using a little bit of that in this chapter. He's walking in there. He's not saying nothing, but he's saying, remember, fellows, before you render all your judgments on me, I used to be you. My father was you. I was you. So right there, Paul was saying, I know you. I know what you're doing. I know why you're doing it. I know everything you're trying to hide. And of course they don't like that, so what do they say? Whack him! He says, well, right there, you just showed everybody who you are. And now you're calling me all this stuff. Well, you're not allowed to call one anointed or ordained by God a bad name. By your own law. You just broke two of them. Oops. You just broke two. Stop it. Go, 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 go. By your own law, you've just proven to me what and who you are. And now you're going to stand in judgment of me. Isn't that amazing? Why did Jesus say, judge no one? Well, because you don't see as God sees. You don't feel as God feels. You don't know as God knows. And then he gave us that beautiful little illustration, and you say, I exaggerate. Why don't you take the big 2x4 out of your own eye so that you can see clearly enough to get the speck out of your brother's eye? That was exaggeration. A 2x4. Who has a plank in your eye? Have you ever had a plank in your eye?
Felt like it.
It felt like it. Especially if you're wearing lenses and an eyelash falls off. You think that dude's this big, man. I'm bored. Camel through the eye of a needle. Christ had a way of making a point, didn't he? Magnificently, in my opinion. Of course, I exaggerate a little occasionally. It's called authorial license. See, I'm a Pharisee. Judge not, lest ye be judged. It is given to every man to die but once, where he has an appointment that he will keep naked in front of God, whereby a judgment or a decision shall be rendered. That's pretty scary stuff, guys. Now let's go back to our clergy here. Is Paul really afraid of these guys' judgment? Oh, by the way, that stuff I just quoted, Paul wrote all that. That was Paul's words. Thinking Paul's figuring it out yet? God's already told him, you've been a good witness for me, and I appreciate all you've done. You're really good. I mean, if I had a cupcake, I'd give it to you. But you're not done yet. You've got to be a witness to me in Rome. So right there, Paul had a little bit of assurance. I mean, being that God said that to him, not anyone else. Everyone else said, don't go to Jerusalem. Paul said, I've got to go to Jerusalem. God told me to go to Jerusalem. So I can obey you, or I can obey him. Now he's before all the... It's going to get worse. This chapter is fluff. He's before all the priests and all that, but they're going to bring the king in. They've sent him to Caesarea. By the way, here's the Mediterranean Sea. Hate to mess up this whole board. Here's the Sea of Galilee down to Dead Sea. Jerusalem's right over here. Caesarea would be right around here somewhere. Kind of where Tel Aviv is today. So now Paul has gone from here to here. He's with Felix. Felix was the governor. And he had a big, huge home, and that's where Paul is staying in Herod's Praetorium, because that's where, it's the government house, okay? Put it that way. It's like our governor's house if you become governor. I don't know where it is, in Tallahassee or somewhere. And you get to live there if you're governor. So that's where Paul is. Now, sadly, and you'll see this next week, I'm going to get ahead of myself. Sadly, corruption is not something just owned by the Jews. Perfected by the Jews, but it's not owned by the Jews. Because Felix will keep Paul in house arrest, so to speak. I mean, he's living in a beautiful home. But he will keep him there for 2 years, waiting for his disciples to come and bring him money and offer him money. So part of Paul's life, 2 years of it, will be spent right here as Felix waits for some ransom, if you will. And when it doesn't happen, then Felix gets replaced, and the new guy coming in says, I don't want him in my house. He's appealed to Caesar, let him go. Well, we're not sure how to do that. So they'll bring the king down, the current king, established by the Romans. They'll bring him down, he'll join, and he brings his wife with him, or his sister, or whoever. And the three of them will listen to Paul make a defense for the third time. And the king will say, well, I don't see this guy as guilty of anything except being a nice guy. But he did appeal to Rome, or to Caesar. So because he's appealed to Caesar, we've got to send him to Rome. So Paul gets to Rome. Actually, God gets Paul to Rome through legal hassles, despite the corruptions, despite the plots of murderers, the ambushes on the way, despite all the best laid plans of men, who prevails? A lot of people through the course of this book, from all the way back to all the way at the end, say one thing over and over again, and Paul says it probably the most times, and that is, you and God make a majority. Remember that. I don't care if 3,000 people says, well, Chanter, you're this and that and that and that. If God says I'm this, then God and I make a majority. Because remember, when all else fails and the life goes away and your health goes away and your riches go away and you don't get reelected to Congress, fact of the matter is, one of these days you will close your eyes for the last time. And you will have an appointment which you will keep, where you will stand naked before the Lord. And he will render a decision. The fact of the matter is, you've already rendered the decision by that point. He will render a decision. So when all else fails, when the corruption fails, and the position fails, and the nice house fails, and the cushy job fails, this ministry job I got now, when it ends, and all the people that ambush and want me out so they can be your pastor, when that's all said and done. The psalmist says it best. And Malachi, the prophet, says it. And Zechariah, the other prophet, says it. Before the sun rose, my name is great and glorified. After the sun sets, my name will still be great and glorified. What he's referencing there is man really doesn't matter. He's loved by God. He's cared for by God. But the one thing God wants out of them, and that's the complete trust, he never gets. So God gets disappointed with us when we try to manipulate stuff and make our own plans and do this and do that, way beyond the reason of a normal individual, and then it doesn't work, it all falls apart. What happens? What's left? God. And throughout the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, God says, trust in me, with me and you together. Nothing is impossible for the Lord. All things can work together for good. You ever heard these passages before? All things work together for good. Oh, that's wonderful. For those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. If you're working His plan, not yours. Get it? We don't get it. The beauty of this chapter is, I'm thinking, way out on a limb here, but I'm thinking Paul's getting it. And even though he's surrounded by corruption beyond corruption, they've already witnessed of themselves by popping him in the jaw a couple of times and calling him ugly things. I'm thinking Paul's saying, well, let them do their best because God is still with me. And he just spoke to me last night. And he told me I'm going to Rome. Not these monkeys. I'm going to Rome. So let them do what they will. Think about that. How many Christians you know act, talk, speak, and believe like this man is, while he's getting the snot punched out of him at the same time? While he's being led to execution, he coins the phrase, for me to live is Christ. To die, well, I'm just going home. And you'll never be able to touch me again. Think Paul's getting it? He's been through a lot. He's been beaten 5 times with 39 lashes 5 times. Pretty bad on a middle-aged man. 3 times beaten with iron rods. I got attacked by a frog. A 4-year-old boy glued to the other end of it. And once he was thrown in a pit and stoned to death. He must have been in pretty bad shape for them to leave him, thinking, he's dead, let's go. He tried to quit. That didn't work. And now he's being put on trial by men. And Paul's not judging, but he's saying by men who are exposing their own corruption while they speak of his corruption. Think about that. You know, somebody said the reason the nation hates Donald Trump so bad is because they can't control it. They can't control him. That's why they hate him. Not that he's not a good president and a good initiator. I mean, look at the money he's brought in, the investments he's brought in, all the successes he's had, and they still hate him because, not because he's a hateful man, but because they can't tell him what to do any longer. That's Paul. That's exactly where he is right now. Now they're going to move him over here to Felix. He just got there. It's the same kind of corruption, but from a non-Jewish sense. He's going to find out that the world is just as corrupt as the Jews are. I mean, it's everywhere. Everywhere. Who was it? The guy, I can't remember the name, who was the lantern looking for an honest man. Who was that? Sosthenes or somebody like that? That was old Greek literature. I can't remember his name. Gosh, I used to know all that stuff. I got old-timer disease. I can't remember this stuff. Anyway, I almost had it. Anyway, he was a guy that took a lantern and walked the earth looking for an honest man. And sadly, of course, he never finds one. So, with God, you can be an honest man or woman. It makes no difference. That's another thing that's kind of crazy. In God, there is no male or female, and yet He made us male and female. Diogenes, that's him. I think.
I'm not that smart.
Did you look it? Oh, you looked it up.
I'm not that smart.
I would have said Sosthenes or something. I was close. Diogenes was the man who looked for an honest man. And the Green Lantern. Then there's Gomer Pyle. Shazam! All right, well, that's the chapter, guys. And it's just setting up for the next chapter, which is going to not just involve the Jews. They will come over here to accuse Paul. But the next chapter is going to bring in all the powers that be of Rome and of life and of society together. And the sad part is, when you look at all of it together, it's all just the same, more of the same. They're all evil. They're all corrupt. They're all crooked. So to be a Christian or a man that believes in God or in Jesus Christ, you are going to know this before you try it, is you're going to be walking 180% against the current of the world. Get it? People say, well, I'm just not getting anywhere. Well, planes are always late. Why? Well, we had a terrible headwind. Well, you got the whole world coming this way, and God wants you to walk that way. What are you going to do? A lot of ministers drop out of the ministry. I had 7 men that I ran with in seminary, and there's only one still left in the ministry that I'm aware of. And you're looking at him right now. That means 6 of my dearest, closest, hardest working friends, and we trained together, we lived together for 3 years, did everything together. They're fixing cars and selling shirts and stuff like that now. What happened to that great promise of God? Oh, it'll never happen to us, Tom. You know how many times I quit this job? 3 times a week.
3.
Those are the 3 days.
The little one doesn't count. I've quit this job 3 times a week for, 45 years now? 40 in this church. Well, I was a minister before this church, a long time. 1 out of 7. It's kind of hard to believe that. But then again, it's not hard to believe that at all, because the one that stayed, I don't have $17 million in my bank account. They might, but I don't. All right, that's it. That's chapter 23. Remember, this decision you've got to make, and if you're looking for worldly evidence or support to bolster you up, for everyone that says, I'm glad you're a Christian, there'll be 100 that'll say, you're a what? They're not going to support you at all. So and you're going to see that next week. That's all.